Sledgehammer Horror Guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by Natalie Rodriguez. Natalie, how you doing today?
Good. How are you today?
I am
Trying to stay warm. It's a little cold over here.
right. I'm doing very well. I'm sorry. I'm in Michigan, so we're used to it being cold about this time of year. We're really starting to feel it here too. We had the rain this morning too, which made it even worse.
Really? Oh, I love the rain. So I'm happy because it's definitely perfect for spooky weather because it's been like 80 to like 100 all month. So I honestly forgot it was October. I still kept thinking it was like summertime just because of that.
And you guys had the fires and all that out there. It's been pretty crazy, not just with COVID, but you guys just had a crazy out there in general.
Yeah, it's Southern California. There's always something like going on. I mean, at this point, as I had to like steer away from like watching the news or not getting so obsessed with it, especially like Twitter. I'm a big Twitter user, but Twitter sometimes, that's like the little devil. It's just like all these things popping up with the hashtag. So I try to be careful with how much I'm looking at that day to day.
I try, but I get sucked in all the time.
I know, right? It's addicting because you'll look at one thing and then it just will be like something else will pop up. I'll be looking at like the new Scream 5 like announcement, and then it's like, oh, COVID cases going up. You're like, wait, how'd that get synced in? Like I was looking at something different. So at this point, it's like, oh my gosh, who knows? It's going to be, I feel like, ongoing. Especially we just talked about that before our call. Flu season kind of coming here. It's winter, so I feel things are going to be like we kind of mentioned, probably shutting down again soon.
Unfortunately, I agree with you, and it's sad. And there's a lot of people. If we could just do what we have to do, social distance, wear your mask, maybe we could avoid this. Like, just get out there. I know it sucks. I get it, but just let's not go through another shutdown. I don't want to shut down again. So
I know.
I get it. It's totally a bummer.
It is. It's really sad, but I mean, something that's been keeping me, speaking of horror, that's been keeping me busy. I'm a big, I've been watching a lot of like horror films and TV shows, or a lot of like YouTube videos. They do a lot of on YouTube, like 50 short horror stories in their animation. So, I mean, honestly, that's been kind of getting me through this pandemic because it's kind of like something I always have on in the background, whether I'm writing or I'm doing like, checking emails, working. And it's been like real therapeutic for me. So it's interesting because I've read an article, I think it was like a month or two ago, they said people that watch horror films are like keeping people's like mental health like in a better check during this pandemic. I'll have to find it and send it to you because I'm like, oh, yeah, it's interesting because I've been like looking at more like horror film content more than ever. I mean, I've always been a big horror film fan, but it's been like, watching it like something spooky and scary every day just to have on in the background even.
Well, it's funny how something so spooky and scary can distract you from the spooky, scary reality right now.
Yeah, no, it can. I think that's what it is. Maybe just you're like a comfort or just like, oh, like sometimes it's so ridiculous. Some of these villains, you're like, it's like, it can be campy popcorn. So you're easily like just tuned out from society and what's going on. And I agree. I think that's maybe what it is sometimes.
And for those of you that don't know, Natalie is an award-winning writer, director, and producer. Her dream actually is to make a film about a cult leader, which I think would be absolutely awesome. I hope that you can nail that because I would love to see some of her accolades so far, some of the things she's worked on. You got Howard Original, you got Inner Child, you got The Extraordinary Ordinary, Fate's Shadow. So much more. All the links to her stuff is down here in the description, guys. So make sure you're checking out what she's doing. She's working her ass off, even through quarantine. She's out there being busy, and we appreciate what you do. As someone that loves indie film just as much as mainstream film, I really appreciate the hard work you guys are doing right now. And we were talking about shutdowns. I hope for your sake, and all of our sakes, that the shutdown doesn't happen again, because it really does feel good to be talking to you guys and hearing that the wheels are going back in motion and getting you guys out there working. So it's something that I hope we can avoid again.
I know. I mean, I really appreciate that. I mean, it's so amazing to see a lot of people being supportive, especially with like indie artists, whether you're a filmmaker, a painter, writer, actress, dancer. It's amazing to see a lot of the support people are getting because I think it's a lot of people are seeking out to a lot of like independent projects to work on, or even just to like watch, just to consume, on the day-to-day basis. So definitely, mad kudos to you. I mean, it's definitely, it's amazing that, you're so supportive. I mean, it's so sad that I have to say that, but, I mean, we kind of know the industry for, being like a dog-eat-dog world, it can be competitive, people can be haters. So I feel luckily I've been around people that they're very like passionate, or they just want to talk, movies, which is pretty cool. Cause I think that was our mutual colleague Amber. Her and I just started bonding about horror films, and she's like, "Oh, I like your tattoos," because I had a tattoo of Terrifier, Art the Clown, and a Heath Ledger from Joker, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, you know, I like that you're like into spooky season." I'm like, "Oh no, I've been obsessed with it like all my life." Very obsessed.
Well, funny you say that because Amber, like I said, good friend of mine that introduced us, and
Yeah.
David Howard Thornton, the guy that plays Terrifier. I was lucky enough to do an episode with him as well. Very kind guy, love him to death. Such a nice, down to earth guy. He's one of those guys that'll just hit you up on Instagram every now and then, like, "Hey, how's it going, man? How you doing?" You know, like that's the type of character he has. And I'll tell you a story when we're done filming because I can't let the cat out of the bag yet. But I got a pretty cool story to tell you.
I'd love to hear it.
Before we end, we have to begin. So we want to know where it started for you. The first horror movie that you ever watched was?
Oh, I know. This one was Ghostface, Scream, Wes Craven, Scream. I think it was like 96, right? The film. Oh gosh, that was something my mother watched. So ironically, because today my mother hates horror films. I mean, she hates my Art the Clown tattoo. She saw that and she freaked out. And then she saw Heath Ledger. She was like, "Why are they so scary and big tats?" I'm like, "No, but they're characters." So it's funny because back then my mom used to watch a lot of like Scream, Wes Craven. She's the one that introduced me to like all these cult leaders. Like, "Natalie, do you know who Jim Jones is?" "No." "Watch this documentary with me." And I'd be like, you know, a kid. So Scream, the first time I saw that, I think I had this like very, very like detailed memory. It was about like 8 years old, and I remember my mom had it on. It was like on basic cable, like some cable channel. And I remember she got up to take a phone call. So I was just like sitting there by myself watching, you know, Scream, watching Drew Barrymore, without giving too much away if people haven't seen it yet, you know, with the little cameo role in the beginning. So yeah, and I grew up like, I mean, Matthew Lillard, Nev Campbell. I'm thinking of Skeet Ulrich. I mean, Rose McGowan. I mean, like, I freaking love them until this day. I mean, I was stoked when I saw they're making Scream 5. I'm like, just keep making them as long as the originals keep coming back. Like, I trust it. You know, it doesn't feel like a remake. It just feels like a continuous journey of those characters. But and Scream, like, I mean,
we can
love it.
We can have spoilers here. The movie's 24 years old. If people haven't seen it, you know, we're gonna have spoilers here, guys. And
for
one
sure.
thing I've heard for a new Scream movie, which I think would be awesome, is
I do too.
Make it super meta. Have a Scream that's even more meta. Have it be real life, like the real, like start the movie off with Skeet Ulrich getting killed as Skeet Ulrich. That way you can bring back Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, like all the original cast, and bring them back and make it a real world thing. I think that would be so dope. That'd be so bomb to see that happen.
When speaking of Wes Craven does that in his, gosh, was this his like 6th or 7th Nightmare, A New Nightmare on Elm Street?
Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
Yeah, I'm hoping they do something like that because I saw on Twitter when they made the announcement, Courtney Cox, Gale Weathers, David Arquette, who plays, you know, the famous, you know, Dewey. They're like, one of the actors, a newcomer that's playing like a high school student, was like, "Oh, I read the script. It's so different from the rest of the Scream movies." And part of me's like, "Oh, please tell me they're pulling a Wes Craven, A New Nightmare." Because I think they should do that. I agree. It'd be, I feel like if this is going to be like the last Scream or they're planning to just end it, they should go out with like a big bang and bring back Matthew Lillard, other originals. Because, I think Matthew Lillard, I follow him on Twitter. I mean, he's very like, I think he jokes about that, you know, with his 90s, particularly his 90 film roles. He's like, "Yeah, you know, thanks guys for doing shout outs." And I'm always like, dude, you're like one of my idols until this day because of Stu. I mean, even though he's like Stu and Billy, they're horrible, you know, horrible people. But I mean, I just think that scene where they're doing the big reveal to Cindy, played by Nev Campbell, was just like, you know, perfect, cherry on top. I mean, they did a lot of improvise, which I think from a directing standpoint is very cool. So you can tell Matthew Lillard, like rewatching that scene, like Matthew Lillard was like playing so much with that character. And I think that's why, I mean, I'm interested in doing a horror film because it just seems fun to do.
Whether you love him or hate him, no one can deny the fact that Matthew Lillard gave 150% in this movie as Stu. I mean, like, it's one of those things where he steals the show. I mean, you watch this movie, Stu absolutely is the guy that his one-liners, his over the top, like with the drool, like every, you know, "You hit me with the phone, dick."
Yeah.
Fucking hit me with the phone, dick.
Skeet threw the phone at him too fast or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, Matthew Lillard. I do too, which I found myself like looking up the Scream movies, like on IMDb, which IMDb, it's where you can look up any type of your movies or TV shows, and they'll try to give like a trivia game behind the scenes look. And this was after I rewatched, actually, this is the second time I rewatched all the Scream movies again. So I just finished, I think it was last Friday, I was watching Scream 4 because Scream 4 came on, I think it's on Tubi TV, which is for free. So I'm like, I should just have a marathon, rewatch the Scream movies. And I love them. They just never get old. They just get very like, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this part. Oh, I never noticed this part. Oh, this part makes sense now. So I always catch something new. So it's very cool because I feel like that's hard to do as a filmmaker, where someone can rewatch a film X amount of times and they still like they're not being like, oh, this is predictable. Oh, you're like, oh yeah, forgot this part was gonna happen. And they're just fun to watch. I mean, I feel like I don't have a favorite one in particular out of that or trilogy, that series, because they're all so just good in their own way. Like Scream 2, I think is like genius the way they tie in like Billy's murder. Scream 3, I know some people hate Scream 3, it gets bashed on, but I like the whole they go to Hollywood and you see behind the scenes of the movie. It's very like throwback to like Hollywood land. So I love it. And then Scream 4, of course, seeing like some like actors I grew up with, like in, Wes Craven movie, I thought that was pretty cool because I'm like, oh, this is like kind of the new generation meeting like, something like, Wes Craven, who's just like famous, auteur director. So, and,
Something
rest
I've
his
talked
soul.
about numerous times. I think
Yeah.
Scream is my favorite horror movie franchise of all time.
Yeah.
When it comes to just being solid all the way through, like, yeah, I think 3 is absolutely the weakest link in the chain, but it's still a good movie. Like, there's little things that bother me. Like, the voice changer really bothers me. I don't like that voice, how they can take each other's voices.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that. There's a couple scenes in it that are like super ultra corny to me. Like the part where the one girl runs, like it almost looks like it's a scene from Scary Movie. Like
yeah,
the way she runs away. Like there's some of it that's over the top, but if Scream 3 is the worst movie in your franchise, you have a fucking fantastic franchise.
No, that's the thing too. And I think that's and I think because I get mixed up still when I watch particularly Scream 2, I think of Scary Movie. Is it Scary Movie 2? The Wayne Brothers, I think that sequel. I think of it because you're like, oh wait, like yeah, I get them mixed up because Scary Movie franchise, I mean the Wayne Brothers do such a fantastic job at kind of mocking it, like, set by set. And those are fun too. I mean, I love watching the spoof ones with the horror films. Especially because Wayne Brothers, they're big like horror film fans. So I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But they're just adding, their style to it, which is pretty neat.
I love Scary Movie. Scary Movie 1, 2, and 3, I think are absolutely brilliant. I kind of fell off a little bit after that. But like Scary Movie 1, I think it's on par with Airplane, and Baseballs. When it comes to my parodies, like it's up there with those. So with Scream, which scene do you think affected you the most?
I think in Scream. So I want to say, it's interesting because I always think of the scene I always think of Stu. I think it's like the scene where he's like going like this. They're watching the horror film movie. I think they're watching Halloween, actually. It's at the party. It's Jamie Kennedy, Matthew Lillard, and they're like with their high school friends. And I think this is right after Tatum, who plays Matthew Lillard's girlfriend in the movie. I think it's after when she gets crushed by the garage. So I just think it was creepy because when you look back at that scene, Matthew Lillard's just like chilling. And he's like, I remember he makes like a fist when they see Michael Myers like stabbing his first victim. And it's creepy because it's like Stu just looks into it. And then when you look back at the scene, you're like, oh, it's because you're a murderer. Like, that's why you're like, this is cool. And then the part, of course, is famous, I'll be right back. Because then you're just like, oh my God, like little simple, like, red herring line like that. It's literally like a knock on wood kind of thing, that moment, like I'll be right back. But I think it's done in a genius way. So it gives away, but it doesn't. You're kind of like, wait, Stu, is he the killer? But like, no, because Stu's kind of like, you're kind of like, he's kind of dumb. He's kind of like, party guy, frat guy, just wants to have a good time. Yep. But I think that's makes it creepy because Stu does like when his reveal comes out, it's just like that creepy 180. You're like, oh no, I knew it. I had a feeling like he was too good to be true. There's something weird about him. Because to me, Skeet Ulrich's character Billy comes off as like a serial killer. I felt like his wasn't like surprising, but I felt like Matthew Lillard's Stu, like it's just that scene where he's like this, like doing the little fist bump when he's seeing Michael Myers kill someone. Because I just always remember that scene. I mean, even when I rewatched the movie a few days ago, I just like pay attention to Stu in that scene, even though there's like 12 other actors in the scene. It's just, for some reason, my focus goes to Stu. It's just because the way he looks, the way he just looks like he's excited. And it's more like, because that eerie, I think that's what makes a good horror film. It's the eerie, gosh, like we don't know that's the killer. But then when you look back, it's that whole oh no, like this is how normal he looks. He just looks like a regular, teenage guy just sitting there with his friends drinking beers. So I think it's genius. I mean, just the way Wes Craven shot that. I think Matthew Lillard's performance, like you said, I mean, it's just like, the cherry on top. I mean, he nails every line, everything he does. I mean, it doesn't feel like he's acting. I mean, I think
Right.
even when scenes end, he always adds like a little stew moment where he makes a move or he just kind of makes he'll grunt or something. So I have to say, I think that's the scene. I mean, it's simple, but it's just, God, it's so creepy. Like now looking back at it when you rewatch that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Wes Craven's great at doing that.
Oh,
He
he
was
is.
he was perfect at doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like even if you look, Rich or Rose McGowan, she's wearing the
Mm-hmm.
jersey at the beginning of the movie when she's there,
Yes.
and that's the same jersey that Johnny Depp wore in Nightmare on Elm Street. And there's
Yes.
little things like that. I mean, there's the obvious one of the janitor in the hallway with the Freddy Krueger sweater
Yeah.
on, but the
Yeah.
jersey, that's one that not a lot of people pick up on, or
I
something
just found
simple
out
like
I just found about the Jersey one too, like 2 days ago. It was like on Instagram, one of the horror accounts I follow, and I'm like, oh, that's right, and I never caught that until this week. So that's a good catch because I think as they have her in that top, like I think it's like she's in that for a while. I feel like there's like multiple scenes she's wearing it. But I think that's like it's like the director doing a throwback to his own movies, which I
yeah,
love because I feel like I always forget, like, oh my gosh, yes, Freddy Krueger, that is Wes Craven. Because when I first saw a Wes Craven movie, it was Scream. And then I started watching, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, started going back into like 80s horror films, even like, was it I think it's 1940s, Rebecca by Alfred Hitchcock. So then I started going backward. So for me, I always forget, like, gosh, like Wes Craven has done so much, I mean, in his
yeah.
lifetime. And I mean, it's amazing just how many of like those characters are now like, they're just like public figures at this point. Ghostface, Freddy. But Scream always gonna have a special place in my heart because so I fell in love with like David Arquette and F. Campbell, Courtney Cox. I always remember her as Gail Weathers instead of Monica from Friends. She's always gonna be Gail Weathers to me, Courtney Cox.
Oh, same. I was never a
Yeah,
Friends fan. I don't hate Friends, but I don't love
yeah,
Friends. To me, it's there. It is what it is to me. It's one
yeah.
of
It's
that's
one of
one of
those.
those.
It's one of those I remember watching. Same thing. My mom with my mom with that, but I'd be like, no, let's put on Scream. Like I would always want to go to like the horror film projects of those actors that were doing like their comedic sitcom shows or dramatic roles. Because I just felt like with the Scream in particular, I think because all of them were not as famous yet. I think that's why I also like that movie in particular, Scream, because they all like blew up after that. Because I think
Yeah,
Matthew Lillard did the Scooby Doo franchise. She's old at. Ski. He did like a few other like independent projects. I think now he's like on Riverdale. I think he just left Riverdale. But he plays like Cole Sprouse's dad on the show on Riverdale. And then Rose McGowan, of course, Jawbreaker. She
yeah.
worked with Greg. I think it's Greg Arake. I think that's his last name. He does a lot of like indie films. So I feel a lot of them. Scream was like, it was their little first like, going to freshman year of high school, and I feel like they had no idea
Yeah.
just how that film was just going to blow up at that point.
And it's awesome to look back at it now and watch them then and then see what they did now. And even what Scream did for the
Yeah,
horror genre in general. Like you look at
yeah.
the horror movies that came out the year of and 3 years before Scream, and then the
Mm-hmm.
movies that came out the 3 years after Scream, what Scream really did for the horror genre cannot
It
be,
really did.
whether you love it or hate it, you cannot deny how important that movie is in horror movie history, because without it, there are so many horror movies that wouldn't exist. It totally
Oh yeah.
rejuvenated the slasher genre. I mean, after that, you've
Mm-hmm.
got Halloween H2O, which is one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
Halloweens. You
Yeah, I
got
did that
I
one.
Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban
Yeah.
Legends, all these copycat movies that came out and
Mm-hmm.
really tried to ride Scream's coattails. And Scream is so amazing that it's still, people are still getting excited over Scream 5.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's how great Scream is to me. So with the first one though, another question I have for you,
Yeah.
what kill is your favorite kill in the first one?
Oh yeah. Oh. Oh, I feel bad for this one because he's such an innocent character. I feel bad. I have to say Kenny, Gil's cameraman. I was thinking about that because I just rewatched Scream 2, and Gail Weathers gets her replacement camera guy, and then her new camera guy's like, oh hell no, I'm gonna leave. Like your
Yep.
first camera guy, I read your book. What the hell? He gets gutted. And then she's very like, she lies about it. She's like, no, he got his throat slashed. She was so casual about it, but I think it's because he's just such an innocent character, and I feel like, oh, he didn't deserve that kill. But then you're also like, but that's kind of like that's what makes the horror goes up because it's like no one's safe. I mean, he's just there. He's innocent. camera guy, but it kind of goes to show, behind Stu and Billy's motive. They're just willing to get, Cindy by herself. So it's like my favorite kill, but I also feel like, oh, poor guy. He got it so
I'll tell
bad.
you this from experience, being Kenny. If there's ever a Kenny in a horror movie, that fucker's gonna die.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at Boy Meets World, man, when they did the
True.
the scary movie one, and Kenny got the
Yeah.
pencil to the head, we'll always remember he was
Yes.
this tall. Like if there's ever a Kenny in a horror movie, that dude's gonna die. Like, I'll tell you that right now. Like,
I know, and I feel like it's so bad.
He's always dying.
And I feel so bad for him because he just gets like so messed up, right? Because he gets his throat slashed, and then it's like, then Gail comes back to her van, and it's like he's like on the the roof, and it's sad because she's just like, get off my effing car, and then
oh God, Kenny, I'm sorry, but get off my fucking windshield.
Like, I think rams are breaking, he just goes over. So I'm like, that poor guy, I'm like, he didn't do anything wrong, and he just had he's just like thrown aside literally. Like, that's why I feel like his death's kind of my favorite.
And he got verbally abused by Gail too. She's like, listen, when I tell you to move, you move your fat double-R ass, Kenny. I was like, oh man, leave Kenny alone. He's a good dude.
It's like, but then of course, like, you kind of need those characters, right? Because that's what I think back then in the the 90s with those kind of characters, I think it's kind of like the Drew Barrymore method, right? Like Alfred Hitchcock did this with Psycho. You see, the famous face, the cute, pretty blonde girl, she dies. You're like, wait, okay, that's like a famous person's, cameo. And someone like Kenny, I think it's the same effect, like the Drew Barrymore and Scream. It's, Kenny's just that guy. He's going to be like, in and out of the films. But the fact that we see him get gutted, you kind of feel bad for the guy, because then I always forget, like, oh gosh, yeah, like Gail just treated him like shit all the time. She just like, verbally abused him.
My thing is like, yeah, go ahead and kill him, but next time name him Josh or Justin or Bill. Like, stop with the Kenny stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, I got two more questions for you.
Yeah.
We talked about your first horror movie being Scream. Mm-hmm. Now I want to go Scream on you here. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Oh, you know what? I feel so lame for saying this, but I just think he's like the coolest villain ever. And I told this guy this, the actor, David, Terrifier. I just think he's such a good villain. And it's one of those movies, the best type of horror film movies I like are you see it randomly being advertised on Netflix or whatever streaming platform. You're like, what the heck is this? That's a cool image. I'm going to watch it. And that's what happened with Terrifier. I think there was that pitch, a serial killer that's like a clown, but he doesn't talk. And you're like, what? You're like, that sounds weird. I was like, that sounds kind of stupid. And then I love Art the Clown. I just think it's genius, the character. I think he's one of those characters you can throw him in space and there's a movie there. So
he's realistic.
It's realistic.
It's not mythical. It's not, and I agree with you. Every time you see a clown serial killer, it's always over the top. But the closest you get with Art is that's the closest you get. So I agree. I love
his little
Terrifier.
Trash bag. He's with his little trash bag with the dead body.
Yeah, Terrifier 2 is coming soon. I'm very excited for that.
I know. I was like, when I got the tattoo on my leg of Art the Clown, because I remember no one knew what that was. And my artist was like, he's like, oh my God. He's like, no one ever talked about Terrifier. So I feel like Terrifier's like it's a little cult. Like people hear about it or they're not fans of it. I have friends that are like, that film's disgusting. What's wrong with people? I'm like, no, but it's creepy because he's like one of those characters. Like he's something that like, oh my God, I'm going to go next time to Art the Clown if, writing my next like horror project or mystery project. Cause I just feel like you said, he's so realistic. And I think that's what makes it so enjoyable to watch. It's like one of those things you want to hate him, but he's just so like charming and fascinating. Even the short film version too, Terrifier. You're just like, I'm rooting for you. So if you're going to kill those people, like go for it. I want to see what you do. And in the infamous, the Saw scene where he cuts the girl in half. That scene, I know a lot of my friends, they will stop watching the film, particularly that scene. But when I first saw that, I was like, this is major 80s throwbacks. It just reminded me of like things like Friday the 13th, even Nightmare on Elm Street. So I feel the director, of Terrifier, you can definitely tell, like, people like Wes Craven, Friday the 13th, even Sleepaway Camp, like, the 80s films, definitely I feel it shows in Terrifier. But the director does a genius job at making it his own with, just the character and, of course, the performance, by the actor that plays Art. It's just it's just amazing. It's one of those films I can just rewatch because I love it so much.
I'm with you. I love Terrifier.
Yes.
But I always end these with the same question. We always go out
Yeah.
with a bang. Scream. We're ranking it. 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. We're using a skull count. You can use half and quarter skulls. So what do you rank in Scream on a scale of 0 to 5 skulls?
And 5's being the best?
Yep.
Oh, Scream has to be hands down a solid 5. I mean, I would give it like 5 times infinity. It's just, you can't go wrong with that movie. You know, and I feel like because Scream's always going to be a special place in my heart because it's just like, it's part of my childhood movies, not to give my age away, but it's just like, I mean, God, my mom had me watching that. And I think that's what's funny because Scream has so much impact on me. I've been talking about getting a Ghostface tattoo. And when I was telling my tat artists that, I thought about that. I was like, oh, well, how come Ghostface? I'm like, well, because it's like the first horror movie I saw that introduced me to Wes Craven. And, you know, if it weren't for that movie, I feel my interest in like spooky thriller mystery, or even some of my past work that's been on the thriller mystery side, it wouldn't, like, I have to give Wes Craven kudos for that. You know, definitely Scream had that influence.
Scream is the reason I got the Edward Monk tattoo.
Nice. Oh my God, that's so cool. I like that.
You know, I got that tattoo when I was 14 years old. My cousin did that tattoo for me at 14, and that was totally a Scream influence. I was gonna do the Ghostface, but I was like, you know what? Rather than that, I'm gonna do the actual Edward Monk Scream. That. So don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you, and I got a story to tell you real quick. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Click the links down here to see some of Natalie's hard work. Keep talking horror. Stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.